Okay guys, welcome to the lab test review for the digestive system. Remember, do not use this as a substitute for going to lab and examining the models. To adequately prepare, you need to attend lab or go to biosis in order to review all the material covered during the lab portion of the course. So we'll start with the anatomy of the digestive system. The following slides ask you to identify a number of structures on models of the digestive tract. Use the terms listed in your book under the title of torso model when identifying these structures. And we start out with identify the three salivary glands seen here. A is indicating the parotid, B the sublingual, and C the submandibular. Next we move on to the board model of the digestive system, showing you the entire alimentary canal from the mouth up here all the way to the anus down here. And we'll start with the top in the head region. A is indicating the tongue, B the soft palate, C the uvula, D the oropharynx, and E the esophagus. Next question, identify each of these organs. A is pointing to the liver, B is pointing to the esophagus, C is pointing to the stomach, and D is pointing to the liver as indicated by the red arrow. Now the green sac here on the underside of the liver, that is the gallbladder. Okay. So make sure on the lab practical that you ask which structure is being referred to when you see it labeled. Okay, next question. Identify the three regions of the stomach indicated here by the black arrows. Name a sphincter in the region of the blue arrow in each photo. Okay, so we'll start out with A is the fundus of the stomach, the domed upper portion. B is the cardiac region. C is the pyloric region. D is the cardiac sphincter. Okay, so I'm sorry, the pyloric sphincter is D right here, and E over here is also the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so D and E are pointing to the same sphincter, the exit from the stomach. Okay. Identify each of the organs indicated by the black arrows and the duct indicated by the blue arrow. A is pointing to the pancreatic duct, B the duodenum, and C the pancreas. Next question, identify each of the indicated regions of the large intestine. A is pointing to the transverse colon, B the ascending colon, C the cecum, D the appendix, E the descending colon, F the sigmoid colon, and G is pointing to the rectum. Okay, now we move to the light-colored torso model. Identify the indicated structure, that is the parotid salivary gland. This is what becomes infected in the disease known as mumps. Next question, identify the indicated structures. A is pointing to the hard palate, B to the tongue, C to the sublingual salivary glands, D to the parotid salivary glands, E to the soft palate, and F is pointing to the uvula. Next question, identify the indicated structures. This is the torso model, pink torso model, with the heart and the lungs removed. You can only see the posterior body wall, the back part of the lungs, and the trachea and the bronchioles here. A is pointing to the esophagus. Note that the esophagus runs behind the trachea. B is pointing to the stomach. C is pointing to the duodenum, and D is pointing to the transverse colon. Specifically, this little bend right here is the right colic flexure, the right colic flexure. Okay, next question. Identify the regions of the stomach. A is pointing to the cardia, B is pointing to the pylorus, and C is pointing to the fundus. And you can see the labeled regions located here. Okay. So notice again, the fundus, the cardia, the body, the pylorus, the pyloric sphincter, and then leading into the duodenum. Okay, next question. Identify the indicated sphincters. A is the cardiac sphincter, also known as the lower esophageal sphincter. The reason it's called the cardiac sphincter is because it's close to the heart. And then B is the pyloric sphincter. The pyloric sphincter. This is the exit from the stomach. Incidentally, those ridges are called rugae. Rugae. Okay, next question. Identify the indicated structures. A is pointing to the duodenum. B is pointing to the pancreatic duct. C is pointing to the tail of the pancreas. Okay, tail of the pancreas. Notice it's very close to the spleen. This is the spleen. Okay, and then D is pointing to the transverse colon. The transverse colon. Incidentally, these little pouches here are called haustra. Okay, and they're formed by contractions of this strip of smooth muscle tissue here called the teniae coli. The teniae coli. Okay, moving on. Identify the indicated structures. A is pointing to the jejunum, which is the second portion of the small intestine after the duodenum. B is pointing to the transverse mesocolon, this piece of connective tissue that anchors the transverse colon to the posterior body wall and also contains nerves, blood vessels, and lymphatics that serve this region of the organ. C is pointing to the ascending colon. D is pointing to the jejunum as well. Okay, jejunum is primarily in the upper portions of the abdominal pelvic cavity. The ileum is the portion that's going to be in the lower portion of the abdominal pelvic cavity, and you can identify the ileum because it attaches directly to the cecum, this little pouch down here, at a juncture called the ileocecal valve. Okay, next question. A is pointing to the duodenum. Notice that the duodenum receives secretions from the pancreas and the liver, which has been removed here. B is pointing to the ascending colon, C the descending colon, and D is pointing to the sigmoid colon, so named for its S shape. Next question, identify the indicated structures. A is pointing to the ascending colon. B is pointing to the ileocecal valve, okay? And that is the doorway from the small into the large intestine. C is pointing to the cecum, this little pouch down here. D is pointing to the teniae coli, okay, the teniae coli, this little strap of tissue that produces the haustra, E is pointing to the appendix, okay, the appendix, this little finger-like projection tucked back here. And then F is pointing to the ileum, okay, the last portion of the small intestine that joins up with the cecum at the ileocecal valve. Now we move to the dark torso model. A is indicating the soft palate. B is indicating the uvula. C, the sublingual salivary glands. It lies under the tongue. Okay, don't confuse it with the submandibular salivary gland, which lies underneath the mandible. This is the mandible right here. Next question. Identify these structures. The cavity indicated in A is the pharynx. Specifically, it's pointing to the oro- and laryngopharynx. And B is indicating the esophagus. Again, note that the esophagus runs behind the trachea and is the conduit for food from the pharynx to the stomach. Okay, next question. Identify the indicated salivary gland. Again, that is a parotid salivary gland. Next question. Identify each indicated region of the large intestine. A is pointing to the transverse colon. B is pointing to the right colic flexure. C is pointing to the cecum. D is pointing to the appendix. E is pointing to the rectum. F is pointing to the left colic flexure. And G is pointing to the sigmoid colon. Again, note the S shape. Next question. Identify the region of tissue indicated by A. A is pointing to the transverse mesocolon. Transverse mesocolon, indicated here, holds the transverse colon, which would run through here, in place. Okay, so you can see that right here. Okay, transverse colon here, transverse mesocolon here. Okay, next question. Identify the regions of the small intestine indicated here by the black arrows. Name the sphincter in that region of the blue arrow and the duct indicated by the red arrow. Okay, A is indicating the duodenum. B is indicating the ileocecal valve. C is indicating the transverse mesocolon. D is indicating the pancreatic duct. Note that the pancreatic duct leads into the duodenum, Okay, next question. what ducts open into the small intestine in this region? Okay, and the answer is the bile duct and the pancreatic duct. Next question. What region of the small intestine directly follows the indicated structure? And the answer there is the jejunum. The jejunum. Following the jejunum is the ileum. And then following the ileum is the cecum, which is followed by the ascending colon, then the transverse colon, then the descending colon, then the sigmoid colon, and then from the rectum to the anus. Next, we have some histology slides. This is a slide of small intestine. On this slide, we want to identify the layers of muscularis, mucosa, and submucosa according to the numbered regions on the photo. Well, one is pointing to the mucosa. You can tell that it's the mucosa because of the extensive numbers of villi indicated here, the finger-like projections that increase the surface area of the small intestine. Two is the submucosa, and then three is the muscularis externa, and you can tell it by the presence of spindle-shaped smooth muscle cells. The muscularis externa is what provides the force of peristalsis that moves food through the digestive tract. Next question. A. What is this finger-like process called? That is a villus. Next question. B. What layer of tissue is found in the center of this structure? And the answer is the lamina propria. The lamina propria. Okay? A layer of connective tissue. Okay, next question. Identify the layer of tissue indicated by A, that is the muscularis externa. Again, note the spindle-shaped smooth muscle tissue. Next question, what is indicated by B? B is the adventitia, the outer covering of the small intestine. Next question, now we're zooming in and we're looking at the mucosal layers. And the question is, what type of cell is indicated at the tip of the arrow? And this is a simple columnar ciliated epithelial cell. The cilia are designed to increase the surface area of this cell in order to maximize the ability of that cell to secrete and absorb nutrients. Next question B. Identify the cell type at the tip of the arrow. That is a goblet cell, and the goblet cell secretes mucus, which helps lubricate the food and also protects the lining of the small intestine. Okay, next question. This is the back. Next question. Identify the organs indicated by the black arrows and identify the indicated ducts of the biliary system indicated by the white arrows. Okay, so A is pointing to the gallbladder, B is pointing to the left lobe of the liver, C is pointing to the cystic duct, D to the common bile duct, and E to the left hepatic duct. Next question. Compare these three vessels as to their relative oxygen content and nutrient content following a meal. We're going to rank the hepatic artery, the hepatic portal vein, and the hepatic vein. And so in terms of oxygen content, the top oxygen content following a meal would be found in the hepatic artery. Next most oxygen content would be in the hepatic portal vein. And then the least oxygen content would be in the hepatic vein. Next question. We rank it according to nutrient content. The hepatic portal vein would have the most, the hepatic vein would have the second most, and the hepatic artery would have the least. Next question. Blood leaving what group of organs flow into the hepatic portal vein? And the answer is the spleen, the gallbladder, the stomach, and the large and small intestine. Next question. Identify the indicated vessels. Okay, the red vessel indicated here is the hepatic artery. The big blue vessel indicated here, that is the inferior vena cava. And the little blue vessel indicated here, that is the hepatic portal vein. Okay, next question. This slide is from what organ of the body? And the answer is the liver. And the way you tell is the hexagonal shape of the lobules. Okay, you can see here, 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 here. And you can also tell by the presence of the central vein. Okay, see one here, here, here. What is the name for the structure that's shown in the outline? And that is a liver lobule, the liver lobule. And so here you can see a description of what we call the portal triad. The portal vein and the hepatic artery are bundled with the bile duct in the portal triad. The hepatic portal vein is the largest component. It's thin-walled and often has an irregular shape. The hepatic artery is relatively small with a thick wall, often a typical arterial arrangement. And the bile duct is small with the thickest wall due to the presence of simple cuboidal or columnar epithelia. And you can see a diagram showing you here. Okay, so there's a branch of the hepatic artery, branch of the hepatic portal vein, and a branch of the bile ductule. And what you can see is that the blood from the hepatic artery and the hepatic portal vein, they merge inside the liver. And so you get inside the sinusoids a mixture of both oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. The hepatocytes, which are these cells here, are what manufacture the bile salts, which eventually make their way through the canaliculi to the bile ductules, and from there, eventually they empty into the hepatic duct, which eventually empties into the cystic duct, which eventually empties in to the gallbladder. Okay, next question. This region is referred to as a triad. You can see it here. Okay, what three types of vessels are found in this region? And the answer is a bile ductule, a branch of the hepatic portal vein, and a branch of the hepatic artery. Next question. Identify this space in the center of the lobule, and that is where the central vein is located. All the blood that flows through the liver sinusoids eventually makes it to the central vein. The central vein eventually drains into the hepatic vein, which eventually drains into the inferior vena cava. Okay, next question. Describe the components here of the triad of a liver lobule. And so what we're tasked with is trying to identify now these different regions. And so if we label them appropriately, that is what we come up with. Okay? Sinusoid, portal vein, hepatocyte, bile duct, hepatic artery. Okay? All right, next question. Label the following structures on this model showing components of a liver lobule. Okay, and so we have this list here. This is a zoom up of actual liver tissue, and so if we label these appropriately, this is what we come up with. For those that are curious, what is the yellow vessel? That is a lymphatic. That is a lymphatic. Okay, so you can see the sinusoid and the central vein and the hepatocytes and the canaliculi, the bile duct, the portal vein, and the hepatic artery, all on that diagram. Okay, next block of questions having to do with the function of the liver. What three types of vessels are found in the triads associated with liver lobules? Again, a bile ductule, a branch of the hepatic artery, and a branch of the hepatic portal vein. Next question. What group of organs contribute venous blood that flows into the hepatic portal vein? The answer is the entire digestive system from the stomach onward, the spleen, and the gallbladder. Next question. List some of the functions of hepatocytes: to detoxify the blood, to make plasma proteins, to adjust the nutrient content of the blood, and adjust the cholesterol content of the blood, just to name a few. It has many more roles. Next question. Describe the arrangements of sinusoids in a liver lobule. They run between the hepatocytes from the triads to the central vein and are bordered by endothelial cells that provide now the blood-liver barrier. This is why the liver has a special property known as immune privilege, meaning that the risk of rejection with a liver transplant is negligible due to this series of tight junctions that's formed between the sinusoids and the hepatocytes. So it's much easier to get a donor liver than it is to get an organ such as, say, a kidney or a lung. Okay, next question. Do the central veins of liver lobules deliver blood to the hepatic veins? And the answer is yes. Next question. Compare and contrast the composition of blood in the hepatic portal vein with that of the hepatic artery. The hepatic portal vein has high nutrient content that drains from the GI, and it mixes with hepatic arterial blood in the sinusoids. The hepatic vein has lower oxygen content and nutrient content. Next question. What is the function of the bile canaliculi in the liver lobules? What they do is deliver bile to the gallbladder. And then final question, where is bile released into the lumen of the digestive tract? And the answer is into the duodenum through the hepatopancreatic ampulla, which is governed, it opens or closed, based on the sphincter of Oddi, also called the hepatopancreatic sphincter. Remember that the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, followed by the jejunum, followed by the ileum. Okay, that brings this to a close, and I'll see everybody in class.